Welcome back to another edition of Church and State with Chris Ferrara and Brian McCall. We're already in August of 2024. Well, we predicted in January this was going to be a wild year. It certainly has been, hasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't foresee well, maybe we did foresee the assassination attempt on Trump.
Uh,
We're certainly
maybe.
not the only ones that predicted that was the next step.
No. And wait, who's running for president for the Democrats now? Has it changed in the last 5 minutes? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, they're defending democracy by removing Biden, who won the primary, and replacing her with Harris, and kind of a strange procedure. I'm not sure what actual procedure they followed there, other than here, sign this piece of paper, you're off the ticket.
Exactly. Well, but we're actually going to start off by talking about what happened in Paris at the opening of the Olympic Games. As traditional, they have an opening ceremony, but this one kind of took a bizarre turn. Actually, worse than I think the Super Bowl halftime show, which used to be the nadir of public entertainment. This, I think, takes the cake. I'm sure you've seen it, but if you haven't, the main lowlight was a mockery of what appeared to be Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of the Last Supper. Basically, a bunch of drag queens dressed up, sat at a table. The center figure had what looked like a halo or maybe even a monstrance around its head, and made an utter mockery, really, of the Last Supper. But it did go beyond that. There was a naked singer who was supposed to be the naked god Dionysus. So it was degenerate, the whole thing. But a lot of focus on this mockery, clearly of Catholicism and of the Last Supper. They issued what they called an apology. Basically said, we didn't mean to offend anybody. We're so surprised. Now, first, Chris, I'd like to ask you, what would have happened if they had dressed Muhammad up as a drag queen and made that part of their show? Do you think
There would have been a number of assassinations by jihadists.
Exactly?
So, this is a manifestation of the whole process we've been talking about on all of these shows, which is the long rebellion against Christ the King. That's why they targeted the Last Supper. That's why they target Christianity. That's why it's open season on Christianity, while Islam is coddled and protected in the very heart of what was once Christendom. It's all about the rebellion against Christ the King.
No, exactly. And now they know they can just openly mock him because even the church is kind of fairly muted in the response. So the French bishops on July 27th issued a statement about it. And again, this is outrageous stuff. Here's how it starts: that the ceremony was a marvelous display of beauty and joy, rich in emotion and universally acclaimed. Why would you say that? Now, they go on to say, and unfortunately, it included scenes of mockery and derision of Christianity, which we deeply regret. So, hey, it was beautiful, but hey, except for that blasphemy and mockery, it was great.
They're useless. A little detail here. Obviously, the mockery is disgusting. Obviously, the targeting of the Last Supper is, as I said, a manifestation of hatred for Christ and his kingship. There's a little detail, though, that's, I think, very telling, even though you might not think so at first. Notice that the figure with the halo, the mockery of the holiness of a halo, at the center of this tableau is a grossly fat woman.
Yes.
This is a big thing with them now. They want us to accept grossly fat people as beautiful. Now, there's a lot of significance to that, because if we're required to believe that being disgustingly morbidly obese and flaunting it, not hiding it, but flaunting it by wearing some skimpy outfit that shows the mounds of flesh pouring out of it, if we're supposed to acknowledge that that is beautiful, then we've given up on beauty, haven't we? That's not beautiful. That's hideously ugly. And if we've given up on beauty, then we've given up on truth and goodness. That's the physical manifestation of a tactic that attacks truth, goodness, and beauty, the three transcendentals that are all aspects of being, all aspects of the same thing. But what makes a being good is its truth, and what makes it truthful is also beautiful. Well, they attack it by forcing us to look at someone who's disgustingly fat and to declare that this person is beautiful. There's a lot of significance to that. Aristotle has said nature never does anything in vain. Well, the
Hmm.
liberals, when they attack truth, goodness, and beauty, never do anything in vain. That's why they put this fat woman in the center of this revolting tableau, because they want us to say that the fat woman is beautiful, and
Mm.
thereby they destroy all understanding of the three transcendentals. Very,
You know that
very
that is a
sinister.
that is a really good point, and very few people have focused on that, right? Obviously, there's so much to deplore, but I haven't seen as many people focus on that. But you're right; it is part of a coordinated campaign to sort of push this idea to deny reality. Like this is, frankly, it's the whole push of most modern art. This hideous splash of paint is beautiful. Say it's beautiful, right? It is really kind of communist mind uh, control. I mean, in 1984, when the main character is they're torturing him, he has to say that 2 + 2 is 5. Right? It's really the same thing. Look at this hideous thing and say it's beautiful.
Oh, that's the motive behind it all. And as the
Yeah,
good book says,
yeah,
woe to them that call good evil and evil good.
yes,
That is exactly
yes,
what this is all about. It's the inversion of the created order and the exaltation of the ugly, the false,
yeah.
and so forth over the true, the good and the beautiful. That's again a rebellion against the created order, which is a rebellion against Christ the King. They know
Yeah,
who their enemy is. Their enemy is Christ.
yeah. Well, I want to move to another reaction. This one is from Bishop Emmanuel Gibillard of Digne, who is a special representative of the Holy See to the Olympics. And his reaction first, he said, "Oh, I didn't really watch it. I was busy praying." And then he said, "Oh, well, then I went and I saw it, this tableau, and I was deeply hurt." Okay, when I read this, I thought, with all due respect, Your Excellency, the issue is not that whether you were hurt or how you felt. The question is, how did Almighty God feel? I mean, that's sort of what this has been reduced to. They don't want to say this is bad objectively because it's objective blasphemy, but the problem is it's insensitive. It hurt people. And as long as, I'm hurt, so that's what's wrong with it. This subjectivist kind of approach to what is something which is objectively evil.
Well, there's a label for this, which is the way of thinking of our time, and the label is emotivism.
Hmm.
So, emotivism is this ethical idea that what we consider to be good or true or beautiful is just a feeling we have. It's not a statement about an objective reality. So, I feel this, I feel that, I am hurt. Not I think this because this is true, or I believe this because it's true or good or beautiful. So everything is a sentiment.
Hmm.
So his sentiments were wounded, but that's not telling us anything about the truth of the matter, because in the Second Vatican Council Church, the Council Church of Vatican II, everything is a feeling, and we said this before in these shows. There's been a loss of essences, as Romano Amerio has said in the post-conciliar church. No one is willing to say that black is black and white is white, right and wrong are two different things. This is good, this is not good, this is beautiful, this is ugly. All of these categories of being have been obliterated, and they dissolve into this sentiment. I feel wounded. Well, why do you feel wounded? What was wrong with it? Why don't you
Right.
tell us what was wrong with it? But he won't tell us that, because that would mean taking a position and
Hmm.
stating a definite truth when the way of thinking that has permeated the church since Vatican II obliterates the distinction between truth and falsity,
Yes. Yes.
good and evil. We're not allowed to do that. That's an old fashioned way of thinking. So it's how you feel about something. That's my truth. And what is your truth? Well, let me tell you what I feel.
Well, and that all goes back to the Protestant Scot David Hume, who destroyed the basis of morality, which used to be the objective order. It all morality all came from the passions. So how do I know what's right and wrong? It's the passions that rather than reason. Right reason is how we know natural law. We participate in the eternal law. It all comes from the passions, and that is really what gave rise to what in modern times is emotivism.
Yeah, well, if you want to drill down into that,
Yeah.
this is the result of materialist thinking, too.
Yep.
Because instead of talking about an operation of the soul, which is how you use your reason, Your reason doesn't come from a blob of gray tissue inside your skull,
Right.
but it's an operation of the soul that utilizes the brain as an instrument,
Yes.
like a piano player plays the piano. The
Yes.
piano is the instrument, but we need the piano player, and that's the soul. So the soul, independently of any kind of physical operation, exercises the faculty of reason. This idea of emotions replacing reason is a way to substitute physical reactions, the movement of molecules. I feel a certain way. I have a surge of adrenaline here. So something must be amiss because my adrenaline and my
Mm.
cortisol levels are rising. So that must mean that this is a bad thing for me, but not
Right.
for you. This is just how my body, it's a bodily response. This is how my body is responding to it. This is all a way of reducing everything to basically matter. When you look at it very
Yep.
closely, drill down into the basement of this way of thinking, that's what you find. Everything's a movement of molecules, and passions are just molecular things, hormones coursing through your body. I am thinking of, for example, even the fact that we laugh at something because it's ridiculous. Descartes tried to give an explanation of that in terms of the movement of the four humors in the body,
Mm.
the liquors in the body, that
Right.
outmoded theory causing the lungs to inflate and so forth. So there's no more discussion of objective reality and the exercise of reason as an operation of the soul.
Well, and interestingly, I mean, from the standpoint of Francis, John Paul II looks like most orthodox person that's ever been in the church. But interestingly, I mean, he was it permeated his thinking with the next iteration of this philosophy, phenomenology, that we only know things through, again, essentially material phenomena, personalism. It really undergirded his whole philosophy. So even though he wanted to reconcile that with the natural law, he wanted to keep the natural law, he really gutted the philosophical foundation of it.
Well, the proper balanced approach is the moderate realism of St. Thomas Aquinas. And
Yes.
Aquinas makes it clear that there's nothing in the intellect that we have not first perceived by the senses. But and then we take that information and use it when we exercise our reason to arrive at conclusions about universals, for example. If you've seen one cat, if you've seen a couple of cats, you're able to identify all kinds of cats
Hmm.
because you have the ability to abstract the universal. Sure, we need the sensory input, but reason synthesizes that and operates independently of the material world. So, we don't say we had these innate ideas that were just born with all these philosophical
Yeah.
concepts floating around in our brain. We develop them through the exercise of reason after we observe the realities that the mind is adequated to. We
Yes.
see something in the outside world, and that's really there. And so we understand it and use our reason to abstract things about the world and to arrive at truth. So we have, as Catholics, a balanced view of reality. Yes, there's sensory perception. We rely on our senses, but our senses do not deceive us, and our senses are an aid to reason, not a substitute for reason. We don't believe something because we feel it to be true or some sort of sensory experience, but because it is true.
Well, and speaking of the papacy, let's look at Pope Francis's reaction. Let me read. Oh wait,
What
wait,
reaction?
no,
Did he
wait, wait,
react?
wait. Oh wait, there is no reaction. Yeah, wait,
I spoiled the punchline.
you ruined it. You jumped to the
I
punchline.
didn't realize where you were going with that.
So the Pope who condemns everything right and left, climate, climate destruction, any traditionalist group, he's got a lot to say on just deafening silence on this. So you can insult the second person of the Blessed Trinity, the Last Supper, the Mass, and he's just too busy to have anything to say.
Oh, but his henchman said something. That is it Archbishop or Cardinal Pogli? I don't even know what rank he has at this point. The head of the Pontifical Academy for Life, which is now
Yes.
anti-life. He said something like, "Oh, of course we should be offended by this display, but doesn't it show us that everyone is welcome at the table of the Lord that gives life?" So at one and the same time, this is typical modernism. He deplores and commends the despicable display during the opening ceremony, doing what modernists do, denying what they affirm and affirming what they deny. In other words, double talk. That's the only thing we've had that even approaches a response by the Vatican. as far as I know.
That's as far as I've seen. Francis is, too busy dismantling the traditional mass, I guess, to say anything. Well, a lot more could be said. Clearly, I actually think it's good because this means the devil is really showing his hand. He's not hiding in the shadows. He's on full display right in front of Notre Dame Cathedral. And that means he's desperate. He knows his time is up. So I think that this coming out of the shadows is a good thing. We may be reaching the end.
And if
But
you look at this in terms of the state, the situation in the state, I like to say about this thing that happened at the Olympics that this is the Democrat Olympics. It's kind of Olympics that the Democrat Party wishes upon the world.
Yes, exactly. This is their vision of the future.
The celebration of the freakish and the disordered and the perverse.
Yes.
And by the way, if Republicans, which is what passes for conservatism in America, the Republican Party, if they had stood their ground when the movement to accept perversion first began and had called perversion what it is, we wouldn't be in this situation. But they've given up too much ground rhetorically, and they can't recover that ground. So now they have to accept things like a gay community, as if there is such a thing. And so we're not able to really resist these phenomena other than to say we're personally offended by them.
Exactly. Well, we're going to move, though, from Paris to the heartland of America. And interesting story developing in Oklahoma. The superintendent of public schools in Oklahoma, a man I don't really know, but his name is Ryan Walters. He mandated that all public schools in Oklahoma must now teach the Bible to public school students. Now, interestingly, he says it has to be taught as history, culture, literature, not as revealed truth, but still teach the Bible. And what's interesting in this sort of deep red state, every county voted for Donald Trump both times. Massive reaction among the elites, the bureaucratic administrators, who are having a hissy fit that they have to actually teach the Bible in their schools. So this guy, I love this, Walters, said, quote, "I'm going to tell these woke administrators if they're going to break the law and not teach the Bible, they could just go to California."
Well, of course, schools all over the country now, as part of their inclusiveness curricula, are teaching students about Islam. That's okay.
Exactly.
You can teach the Quran, the pillars of Islam. All of this is part of a balanced, diverse cultural education. But you can't teach a word about the revealed truth of the Bible, not even as history, which shows us once again that the state of affairs in the state, civil society, is all about a rebellion against Christ and his revealed truth, against the gospel. So I suppose it's great that they're going to teach the Bible as history and put it alongside Islam as part of the curriculum. But I predict that'll last about 3 days until the federal judge enjoins it.
Well, interesting. I mean, for most of this country's history, public schools taught the Bible.
I
And
know.
nobody seemed to have a constitutional problem with it before. So what's going on?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when the Ten Commandments were on the schoolroom wall in a public school, PS 71, in the Bronx. And the Supreme Court did away with that in the case of Stone v. Graham. It's a 1980s Supreme Court decision striking down a Kentucky law that required the Ten Commandments be posted in classrooms. I went to elementary school in the 60s, and I saw the Ten Commandments to the right of me as I sat in that classroom. They were right up there on the wall. And what are the Ten Commandments? That's the natural law. The natural law binds all men in all nations, including the negative precepts. Who has a problem with thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods? Those are precepts that bind everybody, but we're not allowed to have them posted on a classroom wall since the decision in Stone v. Graham. Let's see what happens with this Bible study as an element of culture in Oklahoma. I can't imagine that the ACLU isn't already preparing a lawsuit. Of course, they have no problem with Islam being studied. Why? Well, because Islam is false.
Right.
And the problem with studying the Bible is, well, that involves truth. And we're not allowed to teach the truth in public schools because this is a war against truth. It's a war against the created order. It's been going on ever since Martin Luther in 1517 began the process of disintegrating what was once Christendom. And now we have the end result of that process. You can't even post the precepts of the natural law in a public school classroom.
Oh, even though it's hanging right above the Supreme Court justices, a picture of Moses the lawgiver with the Ten Commandments.
Yes, but they're not allowed to acknowledge Moses the lawgiver.
Right, exactly.
They can sit underneath a picture of him, but they have to pretend that he doesn't exist. In fact, God, as I've said before on the show, needs to go through the metal detectors and get a visitor's pass in order to get into a courthouse these days.
Right. And even then, he might not be let through.
That's right. Well, because he's God. That's why.
Right. Exactly. Well, interestingly, the reaction again among these crazy liberal, I mean, it's even fun. It's just amazing how much they've taken over. That's what shocked me. Because again, in this state where the vast majority of the population are clearly not woke, not liberal. Again, every county voted for Donald Trump twice, but all the administrators in the public school are freaking out. I mean, it shows you the infiltration that even a state like that. But here's what one of these people, public school administrator said. This is nothing more than an attempt to strip Oklahomans of their religious freedom. The state superintendent can say the Bible mandate is not for religious purposes all he wants, but his unlawful, unfunded mandate and clear disregard for the legislative process says otherwise. Again, interesting. But what I find interesting is, and this is the flaw, again, I applaud this guy. I think it's great to try to bring something back, but it's sort of flaw of the Protestant approach to this, that we'll just get the Bible. The Bible is everything, and we'll kind of hide behind it's not religious. We'll pretend. Whereas sort of Catholic integrism would say, look, the Bible is part, but it's the whole Catholic message. The point is they don't see through this facade. This, well, it's just history, it's just religion. Even presenting it as history or culture, they can't, they see right through it and say, wait, students might read this and actually think about religious things.
Well, I tell you what, I remember something else about when I was going to school, and that was the so-called release time program. When I went to public school, you got out of school early on certain days to receive religious instruction. So you would go to, as I did, the Catholic Church to receive religious instruction in preparation for First Communion and confirmation. Release time. So that was another combination of religion that went down the tubes. So again, this is all about basically the secularization of civil society and its total severance from the church, the deadly separation of church and state. And Pope Leo warned in his encyclicals, including Libertas and Immortale Dei, that if you cut off the state from the church, the state loses its soul and becomes basically a rotting corpse.
Yeah.
And that's what we see now in the United States of America, where perversion is exalted and normality, truth, and goodness are persecuted and driven from the public square. You're now required, it's something as trivial as you're now required to say, usually fat people are beautiful.
Right.
It's all part of this regime. You must laud the ugly and reject the beautiful.
Yes.
Defend error and keep truth out of the public discourse. You're not even allowed to say, this is true and that is wrong.
Well, and again, Our Lady of Fatima predicted it over 100 years ago. On July 13th, the day Donald Trump was almost assassinated, interestingly, she told the children, if my requests are not heeded, i.e. the consecration of Russia, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, right, bringing wars and persecution of the church. Right, the persecution of the church. That we always remember, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, but it is broader than that. Is persecution of the church, and clearly that's what we're seeing when the Bible is an outrage to be taught in public schools. When our Lord is mocked in the capital city of the first daughter of the church in front of Notre Dame Cathedral. Clearly, this is an outright persecution of the church going on before our eyes. But it was predicted, and unfortunately, Pope after Pope did not heed Our Lady's request to consecrate Russia.
So, and the 100th anniversary of the request for the consecration,
yes,
is coming in 2029.
Yes.
So the next few years are obviously going to be critical for the church and the state alike.
And that 100 years seems important for a reason in God's mind, because the request to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart came in 1689. The French Revolution started in 1789 because that request was not heeded until, I think it was the night before his execution. Louis XVI, in his cell in the Conciergerie, finally consecrated France to the Sacred Heart. And then also the vision of Leo XIII, when he, after Mass, collapsed and heard a conversation between the devil and our Lord, and the devil was given, quote, 100 years of more power to see what he could do. So there definitely seems to be an importance to 100 years in something.
Yeah, and I was inclined to think that when Francis supposedly consecrated Russia, this might be the ceremony
Yeah,
that finally accomplished the aim. But I'm looking at the text right now, and once again, they ducked the responsibility
yeah,
and buried Russia in the midst of a message that relates to everything in the world, essentially.
yes,
It reads, "Therefore, Mother of God and our Mother, to your Immaculate Heart, we solemnly entrust and consecrate ourselves,
yeah,
number one, the Church, number two, and all humanity, number three, especially Russia, number four, and Ukraine, number five."
right,
That's five different objects of the
yeah.
consecration. That was supposed to be a consecration simply and only of Russia, but they just can't do it.
And again, doesn't have to be a long prayer. I, in union with all the bishops of the world, consecrate Russia to your Immaculate Heart. Stop. Done.
And what followed
Yeah,
the consecration of all of these different things, basically everything in the world, all of
yeah,
humanity? What followed was the invasion of Ukraine. Whatever position you take on that
yeah.
border dispute, and it's a lot more complicated than people think. It certainly wasn't an outcome that consists of peace, a
Yes,
period of peace in the world. We're on the verge of World War III because of our proxy war over there,
yes.
which shows no signs of ending. And now we're also on the verge of a full-blown war in the Middle East, with Iran threatening to strike Israel as we speak today
Absolutely.
on
Well,
August 1st, 2024.
and remember, this weekend is First Saturday, so we're not the Pope. We can't consecrate Russia, but we can make the First Saturday devotion. And if I can make a quick personal appeal, this First Saturday I will be in France, in the south of France, where the next day, the Feast of Saint Dominic, my oldest daughter will make her first temporary vows as a Dominican sister. So if you could, if you're watching this video, say a prayer for her, and for my family, we have a safe trip there to be there when she makes her vows. So, and that's the answer. Again, the little way of Saint Therese. These world events, we have to be aware they're swirling around us, but our little way is what we do in our own individual lives, and we have control over that.
Well, for all we know, the prayers and sacrifices of a single monk in a single monastery might
Yeah,
tip the balance in favor of saving the world. We just don't know how the
exactly.
economy of salvation works. It only took one just man to spare Nineveh.
Exactly. Well, there you have it, and God willing, I'll be back from France in 2 weeks, and we can see what more has degenerated in the world.
Until the next time,
All right,
if
thank
there
you.
is a next time.